Warhammer 40,000 is the grimdark super future of your nerdy wet dream, with transhuman cyber priest and nuns with guns, to the dark forces of chaos and the forever being bullied Xenos. It's clear to see why so many people are starting the new hobby. And if you've clicked on this video, then you've been chosen to receive the beckoning call of Grandfather Nurgle himself to join the ranks in his Death Guard. However, as all 40k players will tell you, 40k is quite a hard game to get yourself into, and a daunting task for all beginners. See, one thing I've always hated is when you want to get into a new hobby, is having to sit through a lecture by somebody who, although very well intentioned, doesn't understand that beginner feeling. I only started playing the game myself in 10th edition, so although I'm no noob, I was a blank slate not so long ago, which is why I feel the perfect person for this kind of video is me. I'll be able to walk you through the very basics of starting a Death Guard army, with new videos coming in the future in the series, explaining in more detail about our units and our different little quirks. So, without further ado, here is a beginner's beginning guide to Death Guard. First thing to mention is what Bricky has deemed to be the golden rule of 40k, which I personally love, and that's you should only ever play a faction that you think is the coolest and has the most interesting design and lore. There is nothing worse than buying an army because you think they're going to be the best at winning your games, and you end up hating having to spend money and a hell of a lot of time having to build and paint something you're not all that into. So if you're buying the Death Guard because you love the slow-moving, disgustingly resilient poxbringers of Nurgle, then you're doing it right. The games are updated so often that an S-tier army become an F-tier army overnight, and vice versa. However, I'd much rather you go and look at Bricky's video itself. He goes into much more detail and explains much better how starting an army can be and where the best place to start is. I'll leave a link for the video in the description so you guys can go check it out for yourself. If you made it past the golden rule and wish to be subjected to the big love of Big Papa Nurgle, then let us begin. The first thing I'd always recommend before you get into a new army is to first read the data sheets. These data sheets here describe your models and all the attacks and abilities and characteristics they contain. You will not know what kind of army you want to build unless you have a very basic idea of what each thing does. Death Guard don't have a ton of units, so popping through them and having a little look at all of the different character sheets shouldn't be too much of a drag. For example, your Marines are quite cheap, a little weak, but like a Swiss army knife with a small tool for every job. Your Terminators are much more expensive point-wise, but will beat the living shit out of almost everything in combat. Your tanks, which throw heavy artillery out of line of sight. When you understand the general purpose of your models, you'll start looking into the smaller details of those models. A really good example of this is your Death Shroud Terminators. Super strong in melee and super tough, with good saves and very high wounds. Although, if you look at their abilities, you can see that when you receive an attack, they're a -1 to wound, but only if they're being led by a character. So ideally, you'd want to run them with a character to make them even tougher, especially if you're running them in lower numbers. A really good way of keeping track of these is by using what's called a list builder. This is where you can assemble and see what things do and how many points they all cost. A few of these apps are like the 40k app, the official one, Battlescribe, or my personal favourite, New Recruit. By using these apps, you can look at the data sheets, you can also organise a list from 500 points all the way up to whatever limit you're wanting to play, while seeing how many of each model you can field, as well as their weapons and abilities all put together nicely organised. This does kind of bring me on to my next point of don't be afraid to start small. Too many times have I seen someone pick up an army by buying a full 2,000 point list and not enjoying it, or burnout, something I did myself the first time I started AdMech back in 9th edition. Games can be played from 500 to 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 and more, so don't be shy to start with a 500 point list and going from there. This gives you great opportunity to be cost efficient. I know how expensive Warhammer is, so take your time to learn your playstyle. If you start with just maybe a tank, some Marines and a couple Terminators, you might realise, wow, having this big tank at the back just launching missiles into some poor civilians is really fun. I want more of that. You might actually do the opposite and go, these tanks aren't really thrilling enough. I want to ram my big thick head into some civilians, killing them instantly. Well, then you have an aggressive player, and you're going to enjoy fielding heavier infantry with more elite units. This stops wasteless spending on models you don't enjoy. But on the topic of money, do you like spending less money? Because I sure do. So for the safety of my family, I am definitely not going to recommend you do not buy from Games Workshop. Do not buy from Games Workshop is something I have never said. I am definitely not telling you to buy from local game stores if they're readily available. Well, and if not, buying online discount retailers such as Element Games in the UK, where you can get an average of 15% per item of your order. Online retailers and local game shops are really good ways of getting brand new stuff still in the box for a discount. A big one for me is resale sites like eBay. If you're looking for specific models, then eBay likely has someone selling them for a varying cost. So keep your eye out for those really nice little sneaky peeks. The last thing I'd recommend for any new aspiring member of the Death Guard Guard family is to find yourself a games club, somewhere where you can maybe go once a week and just learn by playing. There is no better way to learn Warhammer than to play people better than you who are willing to teach you tips and tricks in the game, and even better if you can find another Death Guard player who can show you the tips of our boys. That's kind of all the advice I can give just for the raw basics. As I said, there'll be more videos to come based on different units in the Death Guard and their uses getting started with each, but for now you're on your own, until I can find the strength to edit another video. And said you better lie down, 'cause the angels are watching. She closed her eyes.